Hello everyone, welcome to this session on Ingress in Kubernetes. So without wasting any time, let's go ahead and start with the agenda to see what all we'll be covering in today's session. So we'll start this session by first discussing what is an ingress and then move on to discuss how does an ingress actually work. After that, I'm going to show you guys how you can install the nginx ingress on Kubernetes and then move on to discuss how we can define the rules for this particular nginx controller. After that, I'm going to show you guys how you can define ingress rules for a custom website to do path-based routing. And towards the end, we'll also discuss a question which will basically test your concepts that you will be learning in this video. Alright guys, so this is our agenda for this video. I hope it's clear to you. So without wasting any time, let's go ahead and start with the first topic of today's discussion, which is what is an ingress. So guys, as we learned earlier what an ingress is. So an ingress basically is used when you have multiple services on your cluster and you want the user request to be routed to the service based on their path. Okay, so in those cases you use ingress. So for example, if I have to go to intellipaat.com/image, so the intellipaat.com domain will point to my cluster and my cluster should know where exactly should this request be pointed to, right? And that job is done by ingress. So when you look at this diagram, guys, this looks very simple, right? There is nothing out of ordinary into it. You might be like, okay, so there's an ingress component, and in that ingress component, probably we are defining rules where, you know, if it is /image, it goes to the first service. If it's /video, it goes to the second service. But it's not like this. It's not that simple. So this is the whole architecture of what is going to happen. Right. So say you're a user, you will first be reaching out to the ingress service. So ingress is just like another pod that you deploy on your cluster. Okay, it is a software which has to be installed, right? So that software is called the ingress controller. So once you've deployed a pod for the ingress controller, now the Kubernetes rule says that the pod cannot be directly exposed, right? It has to have a service. So what we will do, there is also a service for ingress which is created. So this service is node port so that it can be accessed by the outside world, right? But the services that we saw inside, the services for the applications, earlier what we were doing was we were directly accessing the service, right? But when you're using an ingress, the rule says that a service should be a cluster IP, so that the services cannot be accessed directly. They can only be accessed through the ingress. Okay, so what you do, you define the services to be of the type cluster IP. Okay, so cluster IP basically means that they cannot be accessed from outside of the internet. But since the ingress controller can access these services, right, and the ingress controller is exports, that's how you would get to see those services through the ingress controller. All right, now you create the ingress controller. Next step is, this is what you have to define. You have to define rules. So rules are not defined inside the ingress controller. The rules are defined separately. Okay, so we'll see how we can define rules for ingress later in the slides. But for now, in this architecture, as you can see, the user sends visits or when he enters the URL into the browser, that basically gets redirected to the ingress service. Ingress service in turn forwards the request to ingress controller, which basically checks the rules, and based on rules it takes a decision as to where the request has to be sent. If it's intellipaat.com/video, then it'll go to this particular service, and if it's intellipaat.com/image, it will go to this particular service. These services in turn act as a load balancer to the pods which are beneath them, and hence your request is being sent to from the pod through the service, through the ingress controller, through the ingress service, and that's when it reaches out to you. Okay, so this is how an ingress works full-fledged when you're working in a Kubernetes cluster. Okay, now let's go ahead and see how can we install the ingress controller. Now for installing the ingress controller, guys, there's a GitHub page for the ingress controller which we want to use, right? And that's ingress controller is nginx. So we'll be using the nginx Ingress controller, which is again open source, right? So you can use this Ingress controller and you can basically install it on your system. So let's see how we can go ahead and install Ingress controller. So all right, so let's jump to our browser and let's go ahead and see how we can download the nginx Ingress controller. So what you have to do is go to nginx Ingress controller, just search for this. Okay, you will see this GitHub page. Just click on that GitHub page. Once you click on that GitHub page, just scroll down and go to deploy. Okay, now in deploy, open readme and go to docs deploy, and here is the installation guide for nginx Ingress controller. Okay, now I'll make you go through this installation guide so there are no confusions as to what is being done. All right, so this is the command which is a mandatory command. So this command you have to run irrespective of the fact where your Kubernetes cluster is basically existing. If it's existing on Google Cloud Platform, if it's existing on Azure, if it's existing on AWS, it does not, or if it's a bare metal server, it does not matter. Just execute this particular command. So we'll just copy this and we'll execute it on a server. All right, so some steps have been done. I'll explain you what all had been done when you basically executed that particular command. Coming back, so now that you have executed the mandatory command, let's go down and read what else has to be offered by this documentation. Now it says provider specific steps. Now what does that mean? That if you have a Mac system and you are running the cluster over there, right? And if you have installed Docker for Mac, in that case, you would run this particular command, but that does not apply to us. If you are running the cluster on Minikube, then this is what you have to run, but that does not again imply to us. Again, if you are on AWS and you have installed your Kubernetes cluster using KOps, right? So in that case, if you want a normal load balancer, classic load balancer, you would be executing these two commands. If it's an application load balancer, you will be executing these two commands. Okay. After this, you will see that there is a network load balancer. If you want to launch a network load balancer, this is the command. If you are on Google Kubernetes Engine GKA, you will be executing this particular command. If you are on Azure, you will be executing this particular command. But we are on bare metal, right? So we would be executing this particular command, and I'll take you through what is exactly happening over here. So I'll execute this command over here and hit enter. So it says service ingress nginx created. Okay, so now let me show you what is actually happening. So when you basically execute the mandatory command, which is this one, you basically get your pods created. Okay, so your pods are created, some roles are created. Don't get into roles because you haven't studied that. Just understand that the pod for your cluster is created. Okay, now what is the next step? When you have a pod, you cannot access it directly. You need a service for that, right? So that's what the secondary command or the second command which we are going to run is basically doing, right? So if you're on Docker for Mac, you can see that you will be running this particular command. Let's go and see what this YAML file is. So if I paste this over here, can you see the type of this service is load balancer? And as you have already seen, if you type the type load balancer does not work on bare metal servers, right? So this command will not work on the bare metal server. Then we have Minikube. So Minikube has everything inbuilt, so you don't have to worry about this command. Second is AWS. So again, if we go ahead and see what this command or what this YAML file is actually, we just paste it over here. And you can see this is again type load balancer, right? So this is again not implied to us. Similarly, if I go to GKE, if I again go to this particular file, this is again deploying a service which is of the type load balancer. So we don't need that, right? Only when we are coming to bare metal, right? And if I just show you the YAML file for bare metal, can you see the type of the service is node port, and this is exactly what we want, right? And that's what happened over here back in the terminal as well. First, the mandatory command, it installed all the pods, and the second command that he executed, it basically created a node port service for me so that I can access the ingress from outside. Okay, So let me just check one thing. Okay, so now if I go to kubectl get pods -- all namespaces, you can see that there is a nginx ingress controller pod over here, right? So this is what you deployed from that particular command. And now if I go to kubectl get service, actually all namespaces, so you can see that you have a service for Ingress Nginx, and this is the node port for that particular service. Okay, so what we can do now is let's go to this node port and see what is happening. So I'll just go to this node port. Let me just copy the IP address, go to this IP address along with the node port. So the node port is this for the Ingress service, right? Let me paste it here. It says the plain HTTP request was sent to HTTPS port. Okay, so as you can see over here, this is a 443 port. 443 port basically means the command that we have to run is HTTPS. Okay, so once you go to HTTPS, you will see a page like this. Just go to advanced and click on proceed. Okay, so that page says 404 not found. Now what is this page 404 not found? This is coming because you have not defined any rule on your computer. This page is similar to what you get over here. So say I go to intellipaat.com and say I type /897. So what will happen? It will basically show me a default page for 404, which basically means what you're searching for is not available. So it says, oops, we are unable to find the page you are looking for. Similarly, if now I type in say 456, right, I'm getting the same page again. Similarly, over here, if I type in this 12345 /1234556, I get the same page. If I type in /5446, again I get the same page. Why? Because this is the default page. Now if I don't want my user to see the default page, I will have to define some rules. So how can I define those rules? So let me come back to my slides. The rules can be defined with a YAML kind of file. So we can deploy, like we created services, like we created deployments, we can also create an ingress rule by writing a YAML file like this. Okay, now I already have a YAML file commands in place, so I'll just have to copy, but let us discuss all these commands one by one. So what do? You first mention the API version for the ingress, which is extension /v1 beta 1. Okay, once you mention that, then you specify the kind of YAML file which it is. So it is the ingress kind of YAML file. So you mention that. Then you specify the metadata, the name of the ingress rule. So this is simple fan out example. You can put any name that you want, right? Then you talk about the annotations. So annotations basically will talk about where do I get all these properties from the installations, right? So this is the annotation. You don't have to test it. This has to be exactly the same for it to work. Then we talk about the specification. So what specification will this ingress rule have? So in specification, we define rules. And the first rule that we define is for the HTTP connection. And the path says if the path is /FOO, then in the backend, it should reach this particular nginx service, which is available on this particular port, which is port 80. Okay, so this is a similar kind of thing that we are going to do now. So let me just go ahead and open the notepad file. So 1 second. Okay, so guys, so this is my notepad file and it has the exact same ingress what we have over here written over here. Okay, so let's change the name to say Intellipaat -ingress. Okay, we specified this, and then in the backend, if I want to reach out to the service name, let's change the path to nginx, right? And the service name is nginx, the service port is 80, and of course I'll just have to check if I have an nginx service in place. So the service is kubectl get service. Okay, so I don't have the nginx service running. Let me check if I have the pods, kubectl get pods. Yes, so I have the nginx pods, but I don't have the nginx service. So what I can do, I'll just say kubectl create service. And remember guys, this has to be cluster IP if you're using it with nginx. Cluster IP, name of the service is nginx, and then you specify the ports. TCP equals to 80:80, right? Let's just fix this. and hit enter. So your service is now created. Okay, so if I go to kubectl get service now, I have the nginx service, which is basically on this cluster IP, and this is the port. Okay, in the rules, as you can see, the service name is nginx and the service port is 80. Awesome. First, let's try with these rules. Let us copy these rules, go to our terminal, and let's create a file. So let's create a file called nano demo.yaml. Okay, let's copy the description or the code over here. So let's save it, and now let's create it. So kubectl create -f demo.yaml. Okay, I'll hit enter, and as you can see, the ingress is created. The ingress rule is now created. And similarly, if you see over here, this is exactly what we did. It says ingress.extension / simple fanout example created, and over here I get Intellipaat ingress created. Reason being, the name of the ingress which I specified in the YAML file was Intellipaat ingress. Okay, now if you want to check the rules whether they are ready or not, you can type in the command kubectl get ing. So if I type in kubectl get ing, you can see that I have Intellipaat ingress which is running over here. I also have this simple fanout example, so let me just remove that. So kubectl delete ing, delete ingress simple fanout example. Alright, so ingress is that deleted, and we have the main ingress now that we want in our place, which is kubectl get ing, which is this. Okay, awesome. Now what is this kubectl ing says? It says that if I go to path /nginx, I should be able to see the nginx server. So let's do that. So I will go to my browser. Alright, so I'm on my browser now, and what I want to do is I want to go to /nginx. Can you see we are seeing the nginx service? Let's type in /engine. So as you can see, it says 404 not found. If I type in http, 404 not found. Only on nginx it is showing me the service. Let's make it a little more interesting. What I'll do is I'll just go to my terminal and let's change the YAML file a bit. Okay, so let's add a path over here. So let's say I add a path and I say that if I'm going to say HTTP, in that case, let me define the backend. So the backend would go something like this. So the service name should be HTTPD, and the service port should again be 80. Okay, so you might be wondering, I don't have a service called HTTPD. We'll create that, don't worry. So I'll just save this ingress rule, and now let's also change, or let us have a look at deployment.yaml. So let me do an ls over here. Alright, so if I go to nano nginx.yaml, what I have to do over here is I have to change the values. So I'll change the name of the deployment as httpd, change the app also to be httpd, replicas, say I want just 2, the math labels, this should be httpd. Okay, again the labels would be httpd. Container that I want to launch, the name of the container would be httpd, and the nginx image, instead of this I want the httpd service. Okay, so I think we have changed pretty much everything. So, and the container port obviously would be 80. Okay, all right, so let's go ahead and let's deploy this kubectl create -f nginx.yaml. Let's hit enter. So it says httpd created. Awesome. Now let me just check kubectl get pods. So they are in the running state, and let me also check if I go to the IP address of this pod, am I able to curl something? So curl on the httpd Okay, so I'm getting the it works message. Awesome. So the pods are configured properly now. Let's create a service for this. So let's kubectl create service, and the service name would be httpd, and the type of the service would be cluster IP. So let's specify that. Right, the port would be TCP equals to 80:80. Let's hit enter. Awesome. So my service is now created, and let me just go to the service as well to verify if everything is working fine. So this is my service for HTTPD, and if I go to this IP address, curl on this IP address, okay, so I'm able to reach out to the pods. Awesome. Now I've edited the demo.yaml file, which was for the ingress. So all I have to do to update the rules is kubectl apply -f, and then I have to specify demo.yaml. Okay, so it says Intellipaat Ingress configured. Awesome. So let's check it. So if I'm going to nginx, it's showing me the nginx page. If I'm going to some other path, it is showing me 404 not found. If I'm go to httpd, it shows me the Apache service. Awesome, guys. So we now know how to configure and create an ingress controller in Kubernetes, and that was all the session that was about. Alright guys, so now let's go ahead and start with the quiz. So guys, the question is that if you're using the AWS load balancer for in our Kubernetes cluster, what type of ingress service will I deploy? Right? So when I used right now the Kubernetes cluster, I was using the kube ADM way, and I was not using the load balancer, right? So I defined a specific service for that. But if I'm using the AWS load balancer, what type of service would I be deploying? Would I be deploying a node port service, an external IP kind of service, a load balancer kind of service, or is the answer none of these, right? So whatever your answer is, guys, I'd appreciate it if you would answer it in the comment box below, and we'd be happy to answer it for you. All right. So with this, guys, I would like to take a leave from you guys. So thank you guys for attending today's session. I'll see you in the next session, guys. Have a great day ahead, and goodbye.